Welcome back to We Are Cosmic, everyone. I hope you are all having an amazing day out there because today we have one of the most important updates you will hear in the crypto world this entire month. Whether you hold XRP or you don't, this is one of those videos you absolutely need to watch till the end. What is happening globally right now, from Japan to Singapore to global liquidity markets, could have a massive impact on the future price of XRP and the digital asset space as a whole. So before we jump deep into the details, smash that like button, type X in the comments if you support XRP, and let's dive right into this cosmic level update. Today's story starts with major breaking news. The Japanese 10-year government bond yield has surged sharply, reaching 1.84%, the highest level since April 2008. Now, this is not a small move. This is something that sends shockwaves across the global financial system. When yields spike like this, that usually signals stress behind the scenes. Big money reacts, markets start moving fast, and liquidity, something XRP was specifically designed to solve, becomes more important than ever. But before we dive into how all of this connects back to XRP, there's another huge update that we need to talk about, one that came directly out of Singapore and has enormous implications for Ripple's future. Ripple just confirmed that the Monetary Authority of Singapore, MES, which is essentially their central bank and one of the toughest, most respected regulators in the world, has officially approved an expanded license for Ripple. This means Ripple can now offer end-to-end, fully licensed payment services using digital assets like XRP and RLUSD across the entire region. Think about that for a moment. While many people out there still call XRP a scam or irrelevant, the Central Bank of Singapore, yes, a major global financial authority, has green-lighted Ripple and its digital asset services. Now, if you understand anything about global finance, you know that MAS does not hand out approvals lightly. This is extremely significant. It means Ripple is becoming deeply integrated into the regulated financial infrastructure of Asia. And this news didn't just come from Ripple's PR team. It was confirmed through official reports stating that Ripple Markets APAC, Ripple's Singapore branch, can now legally hold, swap, and send digital tokens, including XRP, across the entire region. Ripple President Monica Long even praised Singapore's regulatory clarity, saying MAS has set a leading standard for digital asset regulation. When a company as large and influential as Ripple praises a regulator, it means the partnership is real, the clarity is real, and the momentum is real. Now let's circle back to the global markets, because this is where things start linking together. Japan's surging bond yields are triggering fear about what's known as the carry trade unwind, something that can cause massive market volatility. Big investors around the world borrow cheap Japanese yen, then invest that borrowed money into global stocks and riskier assets. But when the yen strengthens suddenly, they panic and rush to repay those loans. And to do that, they start selling assets everywhere, stocks, commodities, everything, causing markets to drop fast. Let's continue, because this second part is extremely important for understanding why the financial world is suddenly paying attention to assets like XRP again. What happened in Japan is not just a small headline. It is a signal of deep pressure inside the global financial system. When the Japanese 10-year government bond yield surged to 1.84%, the highest level since 2008, it told us that Japan's borrowing costs are rising fast. Remember, Japan has been one of the largest sources of cheap global liquidity for decades. Their interest rates have stayed extremely low, sometimes even negative, allowing big investors and hedge funds to borrow Japanese yen at almost zero cost. This is what set up the famous Japanese carry trade. Now, why does this matter? Because the entire global market uses this carry trade like oxygen. Investors borrow cheap yen, convert it into dollars, and then buy US stocks, European stocks, crypto, housing, bonds, everything. It is one of the biggest hidden liquidity engines in the world. But when yields rise, suddenly everything in this cycle begins to break. A rising yield signals that borrowing costs in Japan are going up, which means the yen strengthens. And when the yen strengthens, investors who borrowed yen panic because now they owe more than what they borrowed. The natural reaction is to sell their other assets quickly so they can repay the yen loans. This rapid selling causes markets to crash. This is exactly what we are seeing signs of right now. Stocks dipping, crypto dipping, and a global feeling that something is not stable. It doesn't mean a total collapse is coming, but it does mean liquidity is tightening everywhere. And whenever the world goes through liquidity stress, the need for faster, cheaper, and more efficient settlement systems becomes louder than ever. This is exactly where XRP fits in. Traditional cross-border money movement is slow, expensive, and relies on old banking infrastructure. Banks must hold trillions of dollars in pre-funded Nostro and Vostro accounts just to settle international payments. This trapped capital makes the global financial system fragile, especially during liquidity crunches like the one we may be entering now. XRP was designed specifically to solve this problem. Ripple's on-demand liquidity ODL system uses XRP to move money instantly without requiring pre-funded accounts. This frees up capital, reduces risk, and makes settlement much more efficient. Now imagine what happens if markets continue to tighten worldwide. Banks and institutions will begin searching for better ways to move money without locking up billions. That's where we start seeing interest in networks like XRP rise again. And this is not just speculation anymore. Real institutions and regulators are already moving. The approval Ripple just received from the Monetary Authority of Singapore is a perfect example. Countries like Singapore, Japan, UAE, and even regions in Europe are opening the doors for real digital asset usage. Another important thing to understand is how these macro events can trigger long-term changes. When markets get stressed, governments and central banks eventually step in and begin injecting liquidity. We saw this in 2008, in 2020, and multiple times in between. When massive liquidity enters the financial system, assets like crypto usually surge. But this time, things are different. The financial world is shifting toward real-time settlement, tokenized assets, and regulated digital infrastructure. So when liquidity eventually comes back, it will not just flow into speculation. It will flow into real utility networks. And XRP is positioned as one of the few digital assets designed for global financial plumbing, not just trading. So what exactly happened? Ripple's Singapore branch, Ripple Markets APAC, has officially received approval to expand its major payment institution license. This means Ripple is now legally allowed to provide full digital payment services, including holding digital tokens, swapping digital tokens, sending digital tokens, facilitating cross-border settlements, using assets like XRP and RLUSD in real financial operations. This is not a small upgrade. This is Ripple being fully recognized as a regulated, licensed financial service provider in one of the strictest markets on the planet. This is the kind of approval major banks dream of receiving. The question now is, why does this matter so much for XRP? Because for the first time in a long time, we are witnessing a major central bank giving Ripple and XRP the green light for real-world usage. Singapore is a global financial hub, a bridge between Asia and the rest of the world. It hosts hundreds of banks, multinational corporations, fintech startups, and financial institutions. Being approved here gives Ripple access to a giant network of institutional clients who now have legal clarity to use XRP in payments. Imagine global companies in Singapore wanting to move money instantly across Asia, Europe, or North America. They can now legally use Ripple's payment system, powered by XRP, without worrying about unclear rules or regulatory risks. This is the exact clarity Ripple has been waiting for in many regions. Ripple's president, Monica Long, even emphasized how groundbreaking this is. She said MS has created a leading standard for digital asset regulation. In simple words, Singapore understands crypto, respects utility, and supports innovation. Something the US still struggles with. That's why so many top crypto companies have moved operations to Singapore. Ripple is strengthening its dominance in Asia, and this approval signals the start of a much bigger expansion. Now think deeper. If Singapore, one of the world's strictest financial regulators, says XRP is okay for full payment service usage, how long before other countries follow? Usually, smaller countries follow Singapore's lead. Even larger regions like the EU and Middle East often use Singapore as a benchmark for digital asset rules. It's the same reason Dubai, Japan, and Switzerland are also ahead in crypto clarity. This approval also unlocks a major utility boost for XRP. With legal permission, banks and companies in Singapore can begin using XRP for real cross-border payment flows. This is not about speculation. This is about real transaction volume, actual businesses sending money using XRP as the bridge asset. The more companies use XRP for liquidity, the higher the demand over time. And when utility demand rises, long-term price potential also strengthens. This is why people who call XRP a scam or dead coin simply do not understand what is happening behind the scenes. They see the price in the short term, but they don't see the regulatory approvals, institutional partnerships, and expanding financial ecosystem that Ripple is building. If XRP was a scam, the Central Bank of Singapore would never approve it for payment services. The MS decision alone destroys that argument. This news also ties perfectly into the global liquidity environment we discussed earlier. As traditional systems come under pressure, especially during moments of financial stress, banks will start looking for modern solutions. Ripple is preparing its infrastructure at exactly the right moment. The world is shifting and Ripple is positioning itself at the center of the digital payment revolution. Let's break it down simply. Big investors and institutions borrow Japanese yen because the interest rates in Japan are extremely low. Sometimes the rate is near zero. After borrowing yen cheaply, investors convert it into dollars or euros and use it to buy stocks, bonds, real estate, and risky assets all over the world. This entire process is called the carry trade. It basically adds massive liquidity into global markets, but it works only as long as the yen stays weak and interest rates in Japan stay low. But now things are changing. With the Japanese 10-year bond yield jumping to 1.84%, the highest since 2008, it means borrowing in Japan is suddenly getting more expensive. And when yields rise, the yen strengthens. This is where the danger comes in. If the yen strengthens too fast, the big investors who borrowed yen become trapped. They borrowed the yen at a lower value, but now they have to repay it at a higher value. This makes their debt more expensive overnight. So what do? They panic and start selling everything. Stocks, US tech, emerging markets, European assets, even crypto. This forced selling causes the global markets to fall quickly, creating fear everywhere. We already saw signs of this with the sudden 8% market dip the narrator mentioned in your original script. And if the carry trade unwind accelerates, this could lead to much bigger liquidity shocks. Now here's the key. The traditional financial system is not built to handle fast global liquidity stress. When capital moves quickly, old settlement systems break down, payments get delayed, banks struggle to manage liquidity. Cross-border transfers slow down at the exact moment they need to speed up. And that is exactly where XRP was designed to shine. XRP provides on-demand liquidity, meaning banks don't need to pre-fund accounts in foreign countries. They don't need Nostro or Vostro accounts sitting with billions of trapped capital. They can use XRP to move money instantly across borders, freeing up liquidity when it matters the most. This is the opposite of the carry trade system, which traps capital and creates pressure in stressful times. This is why analysts like Black Swan Capitalist are saying that in times of global liquidity tightening, the world will need a neutral, real-time settlement system that is not controlled by any one country. Not the US dollar, not the Japanese yen, something neutral, like XRP. It's faster, cheaper, and designed for global value transfer. And here's the most important part. This global stress was anticipated by Ripple. Ripple has been building infrastructure for more than a decade because they knew the traditional system would eventually break under pressure. They understood the world would need a digital bridge asset to move money efficiently across borders when liquidity dries up. We are watching that moment unfold right now. Look at what is happening. Central banks are shifting from quantitative tightening to quantitative easing. Liquidity injections are beginning again. Bond markets are sending warning signs. Banks are preparing for a new financial settlement model. Assets that provide real utility, not hype, will lead the next financial cycle. This is why analysts are calling XRP the most strategically positioned asset during global liquidity shifts. And this is why regulatory approvals like the one from Singapore matter even more. The financial world is aligning with Ripple at the exact time cracks are appearing in the old system. We've clearly understood the global liquidity situation and Ripple's regulatory strength. Let's move into the most explosive part of this entire discussion, XRP's long-term valuation. This is where many people either get extremely excited or extremely uncomfortable, because for some individuals, even hearing numbers like $100, $250, or even higher for XRP feels unrealistic. But when you actually understand the purpose of XRP, the technology behind it, and the role it is built to play, those numbers suddenly start making sense. Let's begin with something very important. XRP was never designed to stay cheap. It was designed to move large amounts of value across borders instantly. Think about it. If a digital asset is built to handle the settlement of trillions of dollars globally, it cannot function at a low price forever. The system would become inefficient. High-value networks need high-value assets. That's exactly why analysts argue that XRP needs a higher price to support global liquidity. Now let's talk about the $250 prediction. Recently, analyst Chad Steinrob said that a $250 XRP is inevitable in the long term. The keyword here is inevitable. That means this prediction is not based on hype or emotions. It is based on structural logic. He is looking at global adoption trends, liquidity requirements, settlement volumes, and the regulatory progress Ripple is making. The more companies use XRP for real transactions, the more demand increases over time. And when utility demand grows, price must grow as well. Another important point is that no serious analyst in the XRP community is giving a specific date for these high valuations, because the timing depends on global adoption, regulatory clarity, and liquidity events. But what almost everyone in the XRP community agrees on, including more than 90% of long-term XRP holders, is that XRP's design supports a high future value. Not $1, not $3, not even $10. We are talking about double-digit and triple-digit territory. There is also something extremely important that most new investors don't know. Ripple's former CTO, David Schwartz, openly talked about XRP potentially reaching $10,000 in extreme liquidity scenarios. This statement wasn't made during hype seasons. It was made while explaining how liquidity mechanisms work. His point was simple. If XRP is used globally as a bridge asset, the price must rise to support large financial flows. People laugh at three-digit predictions without understanding that experts in the field have discussed four-digit possibilities. So why do people still get triggered when we talk about high XRP prices? Because most retail investors only look at charts. They look at short-term price movements. They don't study global finance, macro liquidity, cross-border settlement systems, or institutional adoption. They don't understand that utility assets behave differently from hype coins. XRP is not a meme coin. It is not a speculative token. It is an institutional-grade settlement asset with more than a decade of development. And if you think about everything happening right now, Singapore approving Ripple's full license, Japan signaling liquidity stress, central banks moving toward quantitative easing, and real-time settlement becoming a global requirement, the environment is setting up perfectly for utility crypto assets. The world is slowly moving from the old Swift model to faster and more efficient digital systems. And Ripple has positioned itself right in the middle of this transition. Now combine this with the fact that institutional investors and central banks want neutrality. They don't want to depend on just the US dollar or the Japanese yen. They need a neutral liquidity bridge, a digital asset that isn't tied to a single country. That's where XRP becomes extremely valuable. And this is why the $250 prediction, or even higher, is not impossible. It is simply a reflection of XRP's true purpose. A high-value settlement network needs a high-value asset. The more global adoption grows, the more realistic these numbers become. As we wrap up this deep breakdown, it's important to step back and look at the bigger picture of everything happening around us. The news coming from Japan, the liquidity pressure, the bond yields rising, and the carry trade unwinding are not small financial headlines. They are signals of a global system that is preparing for a major shift. At the same time, Ripple receiving full regulatory approval from Singapore, one of the strongest financial hubs in the world, is not a coincidence. When you connect all the dots, you start to see that the world is slowly moving toward faster, more efficient, real-time settlement systems. And XRP is standing right at the center of that transformation. The traditional banking system was built decades ago. It was never designed to handle trillions of dollars moving across borders instantly. It was never designed to support 24/7 payments. It was never designed for the digital age we live in today. This is why the financial system keeps getting stressed, especially when global liquidity becomes tight. Banks struggle, markets panic, and countries start reacting to protect their currencies. But all of this reveals something important. The world needs a new backbone for value transfer. And that new backbone must be digital, fast, efficient, and global. That's exactly why Ripple has spent years building partnerships, securing licenses, and developing one of the strongest infrastructures in crypto. Now think about Singapore's decision again. They didn't just approve Ripple lightly. They studied Ripple, XRP, RLUSD, and the entire payment system. They analyzed security, liquidity, compliance, technical design, and risk models. After all that, they approved Ripple to offer full digital payment services. This is a huge signal to banks across Asia. It tells them Ripple is ready, XRP is ready, the system is safe, the system is compliant. You can start using it. And believe me, banks pay attention to what math says. This is how real adoption starts. Not with hype, but with quiet, powerful regulatory green lights like this. When you look at all of this, it becomes clearer why long-term analysts see XRP as a high-value asset. The global financial system is preparing for changes that require deep liquidity. A neutral settlement bridge like XRP cannot stay cheap if it is used globally by banks, institutions, and payment companies. The price must grow over time to support increasing volumes. This is not hype. It is simple economic logic. That's why experts like Chad Steinrob talk about $250, and that's why David Schwartz discussed even higher liquidity-driven valuations. They are not guessing. They are analyzing the structure of a global liquidity network. But here's the part I want every XRP holder to understand. This is not an overnight story. XRP's journey is not a meme coin pump. It's not about a sudden surprise candle. It's about building the foundation for a new financial era. Ripple has been fighting legal battles, securing international licenses, forming government partnerships, and preparing institutions for real-world adoption. This takes time, but it also creates long-term strength that very few crypto projects can match. We are living through a moment where the old financial world and the new digital world are touching for the first time. And as markets go through stress, as central banks inject liquidity, and as countries begin modernizing their payment systems, the assets built for real utility will rise. XRP is one of them. It has survived every bear market, every lawsuit, every attempt to push it down, and yet it continues to gain more adoption, more approval, and more institutional attention. So as we end this breakdown, remember this. You are early in a global shift that most people still don't understand. The noise, the fear, the uncertainty, all of it happens before major financial transformations. XRP is not just another cryptocurrency. It is a piece of infrastructure that is slowly becoming essential to the next generation of payments and liquidity movement. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe XRP will play a central role in global finance? Do you think these regulatory approvals will accelerate adoption? And what is your long-term vision for XRP? Thank you so much for watching, supporting the channel, and being part of the community. This is We Are Cosmic, and we'll see you in the next one.